It was funny. My partner David Fletcher over there and I were talking with some people this morning, and he was talking about how we've kind of come full circle. So we're a little bit of a unique inbound marketing agency. I think that's one of the things that led HubSpot asking me to share with you guys some of what we're doing. We actually started off as a sales advisory firm. So when I started Imagine 11 years ago, we did sales process design, sales coaching, and sales training. And what we found was that the fundamental problems that salespeople were really dealing with were being caused at the top and the middle of the funnel. So we started paying more attention to lead generation and lead management. That led us to inbound marketing. That led us to become a HubSpot partner. And so for the last 3.5, 4 years, we've been executing inbound marketing and lead generation programs. And I'm sure you guys have this experience, or maybe we're the only ones. We started to create more leads. Of course, we're excited about that. We turn those leads over, and lo and behold, salespeople messed them up. So all of a sudden, we were back in that boat of saying, hey, what's going on? How do we solve this problem? And so what we did about 3-4 years ago was we really took a look at how are companies scaling growth. Those companies that really scale growth, that get from $0 to $100 million and keep growing beyond that, what did they do? And what we found was how they treated lead generation and lead management was fundamentally different than how most small, mid-market, and even larger companies that aren't scaling growth, that aren't growing consistently, they treat it fundamentally differently. We looked at it, we said, hey, this is our sales roots, we can do this. And we started introducing sales development services. And what we found is it's a really nice 1-2 punch. And what I'm going to share with you today is a little bit about what we're doing, how we're seeing it work, and as HubSpot is coming out with more and more sales tools, as they're trying to support the full funnel, I know there's a lot of conversation about how can we work with our clients to penetrate deeper into the funnel. So what I also want to do is share with you some of our experiences, the good, the bad, the ugly. If you have any questions at all as we go through this, the more interactive, the better. Sound like fun? Real quickly, let me tell you about me just a little bit. For whatever reason, I was fascinated by the sales process since I was 16 years old. It's probably the only thing I haven't been bored by within 5 years. And I always wondered, why were some people able to influence other people at that point of decision? And so for, I guess, 26 years now, I guess it's more than that. It's probably 30 years. I'm 47 now that I think about it. But I feel like I'm 42. I've just been fascinated by reverse engineering that process. The fun stuff about me, though, is I coached college baseball for 3 years. I actually coached with Mr. Fletcher over there. He was the head coach, so we had a fun role. I was the number one at work, and then he was the number one on the baseball field. And what's really cool is we were the top 10 offensive team in a year that we won 40 games. And we'll both be happy to tell you that anything you need to know about sales or marketing, you can learn on the baseball field. Any baseball fans here? Absolutely convinced everything you need to know about life has been taught on the baseball field. So anybody that wants to know about that, happy to talk. I got 2 kids. They love playing sports, huge Nats fans. Nats beat the Yankees yesterday with a walk-off. Ryan Zimmerman's 10th walk-off home run, so I'm excited about that. Got a text from my son as he hit that walk-off, so I knew what happened. So that was a lot of fun. So how did we get here? As I mentioned, we started off as a sales training company, and what we found was to solve the sales problem, we had to fix the lead generation problem. Is everybody here familiar with the 0 moment of truth? Everybody familiar with that term? We write about the 0 moment of truth extensively. It is, in my opinion, the single biggest challenge and the single biggest opportunity for every sales organization or every marketing organization on the planet. Fundamentally, the way customers go about learning and buying has changed. And if other companies don't address that full funnel, they're not going to be able to grow consistently. But when we started, this is what we thought the sales funnel looked like, right? We just thought it was all about selling. We were going to fix how companies sold. And as I've kind of shared with you, we realized that it's really about lead generation into lead management. We've come to understand there are really 2 distinctly different things. Lead generation plugs into lead management, plugs into sales. And when those 3 things are aligned, you get hyper growth. You get consistent growth. But the moment you mess up one of those things, friction comes into the system, growth bogs down, and no matter how good any of those 3 functions are working, the process just doesn't work. Right? I'm going to skip through that for time. Here's what we learned. We would meet with clients, and here was their expectation. Let me know if you guys have had similar expectations about this idea. I call it the myth of sales and marketing alignment. So we're going to bring you in as our inbound marketing agency, and you're going to create a whole bunch of leads for us, right? So it's going to happen right away. Salespeople are going to instantaneously reach out to those leads. And of course, on the first, maybe second call, they're going to get a hold of the lead that was created. That lead is going to warmly greet the salesperson, tell them, come on in, we'd love to meet with you, and I'm going to introduce you to all the right people. Absolutely, we would love a proposal from you. And of course, we immediately accept the proposal and peace is brought to all. Right? I mean, that's what clients expect, isn't it? They expect, let's be honest, we run our businesses, we kind of expect that a little bit ourselves sometimes, don't we? It's easy to forget that's just not how it works. Right? If only it were so easy, business would be so much more fun. Actually, it wouldn't be. It probably would be boring. Our experience, we learned that there's a significant difference between leads and qualified leads. And one of the things that we learned is that most businesses think that leads are bad and qualified leads are good. Or I should say that non-qualified leads are bad and qualified leads are good. We learned that's not true. We don't care about non-qualified leads. Does anybody agree with me on that? I don't care how many non-qualified leads I create, as long as I create more qualified leads. And the problem with a lot of traditional thinking and how small and mid-market companies approach business growth is they kind of have blinders and they define leads as being already highly qualified, and as a result, what they talk about and how they position themselves doesn't appeal at the top of the funnel. So they don't generate those leads. They don't get those opportunities. They're losing before they get their at-bat. We've all heard and we all know that inbound leads are different, right? So when you turn that inbound lead over to the salesperson who calls up and says, so, what can I give you a quote on today? And they go, I just downloaded an ebook about how to solve a problem. I wasn't looking for a quote, right? We know that. And this is where inbound marketing sometimes gets themselves into trouble. Salespeople like to sell, right? Inbound leads aren't necessarily ready to buy. And that's a really important point. They're not necessarily ready to buy. So if we turn over our inbound leads to salespeople too early, what happens? Right? And the first experiences, they blow up, nothing happens, so salespeople go, yep, all right, lead, all right, put it aside. Right? No matter, then the salesperson goes, hey, I just need you to give me more leads. And you go, well, what about the 150 I gave you last month? Right? So we go, okay, we're going to put everybody into a nurturing program. But what about those leads that are ready to buy? How can we tell the difference? That was the fundamental problem that we saw. That was the fundamental problem that we wanted to solve. What we found was that companies built really flat funnels, right? So they would do all the things up top. They'd have a nice website. They would do some promotion. They'd go to trade shows. So they'd get some awareness. But their next step was, are you ready to buy? And so they weren't building that middle of the funnel. They weren't building, I like to call it a manufacturing line, as things were moving through, creating opportunities to make more sales. That's the problem that we saw. Anybody see a similar problem? What we found was there was a chasm. See, I used to say this. I used to say the problem was that marketing's job ends too early and sales' job starts too late. And I used to believe that was true. The problem with that was that infers that marketing should push a little further along into the process, and sales should start a little bit earlier. And for about 2 years, that's what we tried to do. But here's what we found. It didn't work. We still weren't getting that consistent alignment. I mean, don't get me wrong. If we put an SLA in place and we stayed on top of the SLA and we enforced it, and with will and determination, we stayed on top of it, we could get alignment, but alignment never stuck. And what we discovered was this was more than a misalignment, this was a chasm. And leads were coming through, they were falling into the chasm, and a few would have the momentum, they'd jump across and and we'd close some sales there. What we realized was this chasm can't be solved by just marketing or just sales. We actually call it a third discipline. It's that whole lead management, lead generation to lead management discipline. And what it's called increasingly is sales development. Have you all seen this statistic before? 70% of leads, 70% of marketing qualified leads never turn into sales. Lead management's the common cause, lack of lead nurturing. By the way, here's an interesting statistic for you. 79%, this is from Topo, which is a analysis firm in the sales enablement space. 79% of leads are never followed up with. 79% of the leads that you're turning over to the sales teams for your clients are never getting any follow-up from anybody. Not surprising that 70% never end up buying. What we found was the way to fill that chasm was to build this sales development process. And that's how we've gotten back into sales services, and there's a lot of opportunities for you as you're looking at it to be able to, from helping your clients understand that chasm, helping them understand the unique things that happen in there, helping them develop a system to handle that. Now, what we do is we actually bring a different staffing model to the game. We actually have dedicated sales development reps. Some companies aren't big enough for that. Some companies just don't believe in that concept, and that's okay. They want their salespeople to handle them. What we found, and we have clients like that, what we found is just by explaining to them what's happening in this chasm and how that salesperson has to behave differently, that in essence the salesperson is now in a sales development role. It helps manage that behavior change a little bit. It helps gets a little bit more of that alignment. And that's what we've built. Anybody here familiar with the term sales development? Anybody done any? Okay, a little bit. So anybody wondering, okay, what is sales development? It's the combination of email nurturing, telephone prospecting, and data and analytics. And here's what got us really excited about sales development. Two of those three circles play to our strengths, don't they? We already know how to do nurturing. We already know how to create those different tracks. We already know how to personalize to improve the results and conversion rates for emails. We've been doing it for decades. Sales is just beginning to figure it out. Data and analytics, we've been playing that game for decades. Salespeople have just been saying, how many people have I made a proposal to? The difference, and we found it scary for some, is there is a phone prospecting component to it. Now, in some cases, the phone prospecting is simply working inbound leads. And when you're generating enough inbound leads, that's a great way to do it. But it also typically involves some component of outbound. Now, the opportunity with outbound when you're doing inbound, which again plays to your strengths, is you can be very inboundy with it. See, the problem with inbound marketing is we don't really control who responds to our message. Right? We can influence it, and right, all the messaging, all the persona work we do is important, but we don't control who sees it. When you add the outbound component that's got targeted focus, we're able to get that inbound message to the people that we want to have see it. I say if Muhammad doesn't come to the mountain, we'll bring the mountain to Muhammad. And I will tell you, as an organization, we do not get lost in this idea of inbound or outbound. Actually, we now call it all bound. That's what we are firm believers in all bound. We are firm believers in working every channel we can to make sure that our client's message is getting to the right people in the right way. Now, here's some really interesting numbers for you. This was a study done by InsideSales.com, which is the #1 platform for managing outbound calling that automates the calling. They do some great research. They're kind of the HubSpot of inside sales, if you will. And Inside Sales actually commissioned the Kellogg School of Business to conduct this study to make sure that it was, fully independent. And here's what they found. When you specialize, when you take the role of sales development, when you take the role of working leads, getting them to a sales qualified status, what Inside Sales called fronters, I really don't know why they call them fronters, but that's what they did. And you separate it from the closer role, that new salesperson that actually manages the sales process, you will typically see a 7-point increase in your closing rate. And that's not proposal to close, that's from lead to close. Or qualified, I'm sorry, sales qualified lead to close. A 7-point increase. So if your closing rate's 10%, what they found was when you specialized roles, that rate went to 17%. 20% went to 27%. Right? So a significant impact by being able to specialize that role. Part of the reason is the roles are very, very different. New sales is a highly variant, slow boil role. Sales development is a high volume, do the same thing, work a process role. And so by specializing, you drive greater penetration, you drive greater conversion, you drive greater closing. Does that make sense? We saw this I'm sorry, yes. Yes.
Was it the separation of both the fronter and the expander, the combination of that caused the 7-point increase, or was it just the fronter?
It was actually the fronter and the closer. So the expander, that actually, we're bringing it, that's a chart that brought in something else from another part of the study. But the 7-point was just about the sales development, taking that off of the salesperson, right? And actually what we find, by the way, is when you take it off of the salesperson, you actually dramatically increase the capacity of salespeople. And, let's be honest, good salespeople are the hardest people to hire on the planet. Yes?
So you're basically looking at sales development or the fronter as somebody who's moving a marketing qualified lead into a sales qualified
Correct.
lead
Correct.
in a different parlance.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Actually, we use that terminology on a regular basis. Correct. That's really what it is. Sales development takes qualified or marketing qualified leads, moves them to sales qualified leads. That's what they do 100% of the time, all day, every day. That's their focus. And once they're sales qualified, they're done. And now the salesperson is now working sales qualified leads. They're working people who are ready for that sale. They're ready for that process. And so what we found was this was a huge opportunity for inbound marketers because sales development actually plays to our strengths more than it plays to the sales side strengths. Because every time you put the sales development role, I don't want to say every time, but the vast majority of times that you put that role under sales, what does sales care about? Hit the number. Hit the number. We got to hit the number. And so what ends up happening is those sales developers, they go, well, hey, let's turn the sales development team into the people who take MQLs to SQLs, but they'll also handle small deals, right? And once you do that, the whole thing blows up, right? Allow people to specialize. And my experience is 90% of people who handle new sales, there's nothing they'd love more than to say, only 10% of my job is about strategic prospecting, and now I've got a steady stream of truly sales qualified leads that I can manage. Yeah, I can be really successful with that. I can do that. Sales development, inbound marketing, they are the yin and the yang to solving that sales chasm problem. You cannot solve it completely without inbound marketing, and I'll go out on a limb and say you cannot solve it completely without sales development. Now, do you specialize the role? That's up to you. That's a choice, or that's not up to you, that's up to the client, right? But understanding that when I'm the salesperson, I'm behaving in that sales development role, so there's different games at play, there's a different playbook, there's a different way to handle it, has a dramatic impact to getting people across that chasm. Any questions? Yes?
And you may hit on this later, but have you looked at, do you have clients that actually outsource the sales development role back to you, or have you worked with
That's actually what we do. That's actually the prime thing that we do. Okay. Is we actually, and I'll show you this in a minute, we build for companies, we lead for companies, and what we do most of the time is we actually execute. Because another part of the problem is it's a very different culture. Sales development operates in a very different culture. So a lot of times, having them housed here, we've built the technology stack, we've done all those things that clients can leverage. And again, that's another opportunity for partners to be able to help your clients find different ways to solve that problem. So here's what we found about, there's kind of 3 levels of sales services, if you will. At the basis, there's advisory. And by the way, without a doubt, I will say 100% that if you're not involved in advisory on the sales side, your future is limited. You have to be there. If you go out to the real cutting edge sales organizations right now, those companies that are scaling, and you read what's happening, some of the most important headlines in the magazines and the articles that are being written are all about how, if you want to build a successful sales organization, look to your CMO. Right? Well, that's the role we play with a lot of clients, right? We've got to be able to play that role. We've got to be able to speak to revenue. We've got to talk about, whether we get deep into sales services or not, we have to be able to talk about how we connect to that sales side and be able to be at that table for the sales conversation. Great opportunity to increase retainers because you can connect that more to bottom line value. They can see things, they understand where you're taking it through, and we see retainer lifts simply by adding strategic sales services to our programs. Second thing you can do, you can say, you know, Doug made a lot of sense today, but he strikes me as being a little crazy. And I don't want to be crazy like him. I don't want to get in all that mess, and I would certainly respect you. If I had known what I know now when we started doing this, I'm not sure I would have built this sales development program. But the next option is you can provide leadership and development, right? You can be the ones who bring the data and the information and the structure and the best practices to your clients. You can work with that sales team as you, important thing, we all know this, the sales side speaks a different language than the marketing side. As you learn this language and you bring these things over, you enroll the sales side more, you're able to get deeper and deeper, add specialized nurturing programs as well, further enhance your retainer. And the last thing is you can get in the trenches and execute. Right? That's where you take on a little bit more risk. Retainers can get really, really big. I mean, we've had situations where we've taken retainers from $7,000 retainers to $30,000 retainers as a result of doing this. Really locked in. I mean, if you want to talk about being sticky, if you're the organization that's managing the database, that's really creating sales qualified leads, that's a really hard thing to unwind. So there's lots of opportunity there. But as you think and you hear all about this sales services conversation that I think is great that HubSpot is initiating with us, understand there's different flavors of it. Figure out what the right one is, step your toe into it, move forward from there. So here's what we're doing. You kind of stole my thunder. Thanks, I appreciate that. That's what we need. So we went all in. We are all in sales development and inbound marketing. That's what we do. We are a lead generation and lead management company. That's how we talk about ourselves. We have the ability to support your full funnel. We build it. So we actually have our first prospect right now that is talking to us. They've got the team in place. It's not working for them. They've been reading some of the things that we've been doing, actually got introduced by a partner, and they want us to come in, take a look at how they're doing things, build the process, build the playbook, build the scripts. Then they're going to turn it back over to their team to execute. We lead it. We've got a company right now that we've just launched that for the next year we'll be doing the execute, but the plan is we're going to staff them up to 3 sales development reps. And then roughly 12 to 18 months from now, those sales development reps will become employees for their company. And we'll continue to lead the process, so we'll operate as the management component to it, to oversee it, but it won't be our team that does it anymore. And then the third one, which is what you brought up, is we actually execute it from a fractional standpoint to multiple sales development reps all the way through. We wrote an ebook on how to effectively manage inbound leads. We give you, by the way, our entire process for lead classification, lead management. I should have put the URL up there. If anybody wants me to send them an email of that workbook, and it kind of walks through our sales development process for how we manage inbound leads, just give me a business card. I'm happy to share it with you. Something that you can begin to play. You can talk with your clients about that chasm and about some key things for how to manage the process effectively. We actually include email templates as well in there, so I think it's some good stuff, if you ask me. And we call it the Demand Generator Program. So what we do is we run complementary campaigns. We want to drive the right people to the inbound net. If you take a look at most studies, they will tell you that somewhere between 3 to 10% of any market at any given time is actively in a buying process. And so if all you're doing is outbound dialing and you haven't built the inbound net to complement it, now that's different than just doing inbound marketing while you're also doing calling. It's really combining the two. If you haven't done that, then you can only appeal to 3 to 10% of the market, and your success as an outbound company or an outbound person is dependent on timing, highly, highly dependent on timing. We're actually now able to track, because we execute all this through HubSpot, by the way. We're able to track the calls that we're making. What does that do in terms of driving traffic to the website? So we can show the efforts of salespeople or what we're doing elsewhere. Great opportunity is these campaigns play to the strengths of inbound marketers. So if you want to dip your feet into sales services, talk to your clients about creating specialized sales nurturing campaigns. They're different than just our marketing nurturing campaigns, but you can get into that sales nurturing campaign designed for salespeople to use. Sometimes they control the process of what the emails are. By the way, use the HubSpot CRM, build the templates into the CRM, and the salespeople can use them. You're developing it, shows more value, shows how you're getting across the chasm, gives you the opportunity to drive more value, increase your retainers. We do outreach, we do lead management, lead qualification, we manage the process, and we do get into sales process design to make sure that it is something we do have some specialization in for that very last mile. If a client's sales process is screwed up, we can help them deal with that. HubSpot CRM, great tool. By the way, so far everything I've seen, everyone loves it. Right, David, it's 100% satisfaction rate is what I'm hearing? So we use HubSpot CRM. By the way, we use HubSpot CRM for a lot of our clients that aren't doing our sales development program, and just by being able to clearly identify what's happening in their deal pipeline. And I'll let you know, by the way, half of our clients that are on HubSpot CRM use Salesforce. Right, so we actually use that sync to keep everything up, but we're able to look at it within HubSpot, see what their deal flow is, see how things are going, and we can have that conversation saying, hey, we've noticed that something's been hung up here. What can we do from a marketing perspective, et cetera. We use the dashboard extensively to be able to track what our individual reps are doing, test scripts, test opportunities, test messages, make sure that we've got the productivity. We are heavy duty users of the call queue capability. If any of you are doing any outreach for your company, this thing will save you 3 times the time. I mean, it's insane. You set up the people you want to call and you just sit back, put on your headset, you manage your calls, you keep everything in there. For our sales development reps, it's highly effective and a huge productivity multiplier. And it stands up. It's not anywhere near as complex as the inside sales tool is. Inside sales has a really strong dialer, but it's really complex and it's also really expensive. And then we also use the full view. So what you see here, which you can't really read, part of what we do in the process, and I should have said this earlier, you cannot have alignment between sales and marketing if you don't have a clear definition of what a sales qualified lead is. Right, because that's the end of the chasm. That's when the sales team picks it up. That's when, that's what, and by the way, they may use a term other than sales qualified lead. I don't really care what they call it, but what is the clear definition that says it is now in the hands of a salesperson, this is the right person for us to have in our pipeline? If that is not clearly defined, and it rarely is, you can't have alignment because you don't really know what you're pointing to. What we then do is take that definition, and it's the combination of some analytics, some specific data that they have to meet, but also there's a qualitative component. There's certain things that we have to know about them, and the situation has to meet a situation that says there's a probability of success here. Well, all of those questions and all that data is right in the side view of HubSpot CRM. So we or our client or our SDRs or the salesperson or whomever can go in, take a look at what the status is, what else do we need to learn. Maybe we got one piece from one person in the conversation. It's real easy to take that and get that to the next piece and keep everything aligned. So HubSpot is at the center of what we do. A couple words of maybe not wisdom, but experience when it comes into moving to the sales services side. And I guess if I was talking to some sales organizations, some sales advisory firms, I would say here's my words of experience when you walk to the marketing side, because we learned some of that lesson as well. Salespeople and sales leaders act and think differently than marketers do. Right? And so here's the big one. Marketers tend to be longer term thinkers, and we tend to be a little bit more rules based. Right? So we say there's a funnel, right? And we see the funnel as a linear thing. Right? We say there's a top, there's a middle, there's a bottom. Salespeople don't see that. Salespeople and a lot of sales leader, they're very short-term thinkers. What do they think about every day? The number, right? And anything that you talk to them about, we learned this the hard way, even when we were doing sales advisory. Anytime you're talking to them about something that's not about the number, you're coming across to them like just another headache that they're going to have to deal with. So when you talk to them, make sure, when you're talking about inbound marketing, make sure you're talking to them about it in terms of how it's going to help them hit the number, how it's going to make things easier, how it's going to create leverage or whatever the case may be. Salespeople as well. So don't try to make salespeople marketers. Don't try to make marketers salespeople, but kind of learn how to speak multiple languages. That's kind of be multilingual. It's on the sales side where things break. Yeah, we sent an email, we hit the send button, and we didn't change the title of the email. I mean, has anyone other than my company ever done that? I'm the only one, probably, right? And it's like, okay. But here's the good news. Only 20% of the people opened the email. Right? So, I mean, frankly, 80% they didn't even know we sent it. So it's not really that bad. Well, you start making phone calls into people or you start talking to salespeople in terms of how you're managing things, that's where things break. Now, one of our strengths is we're okay with broken plates, right? We get that sometimes when you're trying to make progress, things break. But understand, as you move more towards the sales side, you will have to deal with things breaking. And everything to the sales side, I'm exaggerating being an absolute, but everything to the sales side is a crisis. Now, if you think everything to the marketing side is a crisis, which we experience, that's true, but it's nothing compared to how the sales side treats that crisis. Oh my God, you sent this to my number one prospect. Now they're never going to buy from me. Really? How good was your proposition if they got one wrong? But that's kind of where it is. And the salespersons, the sales managers meet the number. Biggest advice for there, just warn them up front. And sales organizations know it. They know that things break. They know it doesn't work all the time. They've got that same myth that I led off with. Be up front. Things are going to break. We're going to test stuff. And that means, the key is not do we make a mistake, but did we learn from that mistake? Choose the level of service you want purposefully. Don't fall too deep to the sales services side without being purposeful from it. Because if you do, it can backfire. And we lost a client because something backfired and, frankly, they were unreasonable. All you have to do is ask me. I'll tell you all about it. But, and the other thing, too, that I want to tell you, and just as a side, I don't mean to make this a commercial. This is actually something that we've now just started offering. We have to move towards providing a total solution if we want to drive our revenues up and if we want to stick. Right? We've got to solve that whole problem. But you know what? You don't have to solve the problem on your own. There's lots of people who can plug in to what you're doing. Look at partnerships as a way to provide that sales services. Again, the opportunity is if you're managing the inbound marketing program, you're the quarterback because you're controlling the message that's going out there. And that's the key. You've got the buyer personas, you've got the message. Whoever owns the buyer personas and the messages, they own the process, right? And you can build your team around you to manage that full funnel, drive more value, and be in a stronger position.